We are creatures of rhythm. We are born to the beat of a heart. We live by the ticking of a clock. We measure our lives in the cycles of the sun and moon. Noise is the proof of our existence. The wind, the rain, the sound of our own voice. It all tells us that we are here and that time is moving. But what if there was a place where this grand, chaotic rhythm simply stops? A place not just quiet, but empty of sound itself. A place where time does not pass, but pools. A place where you can enter, and the universe forgets you. High in the serrated spine of the forgotten mountains, beyond the last struggling line of ancient pines, there is a place the locals avoid. They don't speak of it with fear, but with a strange, hollow reverence. It is not a grand opening. It is a scar in the rock, a narrow fissure from which a cold, dry air breathes. They call it the mouth of stillness. The air around it is different. The birds do not sing. The wind itself seems to halt its journey, pausing before this crack in the world, as if peering into an abyss it does not understand. The legends are not of monsters. They are not of death. They are of return. They whisper of hunters and travelers who strayed too close, drawn by the profound silence. They vanish. Not for centuries. Not for years. Sometimes just for a day. Sometimes for a week. They reappear at the edge of the village, looking just as they did. They are not starved. They are not aged. They are not mad. They are simply finished. Their eyes, once bright with plans and passions, are calm and still as a deep, frozen lake. When they speak, their voices are soft, as if they have forgotten how to break the silence. They have been to the cave where time sleeps, and they have been reborn. There was a cartographer, a young man named Elias. He was a man of logic, of measurements and lines. He lived to map the unknown, to bind the world in the neat ink of his charts. The legend of the mouth of stillness was, to him, a challenge, a geographical anomaly. Absolute silence, he would say, a physical impossibility. There is always sound. The wind, the stone settling, the water. He believed it was a complex system of tunnels that muffled the noise, a place of simple geology mistaken for magic. He prepared his expedition, coils of rope, lanterns that would burn for 2 days, and his precious tools of measurement. His assistant, Lyra, a woman of the valley who respected the old ways, begged him not to go. "It is not a place you map, Elias," she said. "It is a place you become." He simply smiled, adjusted his pack, and promised to be back by nightfall. He approached the fissure, lit his lantern, and stepped from the world of wind into the world of stone. The first 100 yards were normal. A tight, winding passage. The air was cold. He could hear the drip, drip, drip of water from the ceiling, the crunch of his boots on the gravel floor. His lantern cast familiar, dancing shadows. He called out, and his voice echoed back, reassuring him. "Echo, echo, echo." He was in a cave. Nothing more. Then he passed what felt like a threshold. It was not a door. It was a change in the air. The dripping stopped, not gradually. It just ceased. He stopped walking. The crunch of his boots was gone. There was only silence. He took another step. The sound of his boot on the stone was wrong. It was flat. Dead. There was no echo. His foot made a sound, and the sound traveled no further than his own ear before it was swallowed by the darkness. He called out again, "Lyra!" His voice felt thick in his throat. It left his mouth and vanished. It was as if he had shouted into a pillow made of infinite dark. A sudden primal fear, colder than the cave air, gripped him. This was the absolute silence. It was not an absence of noise. It was a presence. A heavy, ancient, crushing void that actively devorated sound. He could hear his own heart, a terrified drum. Thump, 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 thump. He could hear the strange, thin rush of blood in his ears. He held his breath, and the sounds of his own body stopped. And there was nothing. A silence so profound, so complete, that it felt like the sound of the universe holding its breath. He felt untethered, a single point of consciousness floating in a vacuum. He felt his identity beginning to fray, the edges of Elias dissolving into the stillness. His lantern was his only anchor. He pushed forward, desperate to find a wall, a boundary. The tunnel opened suddenly into a vast cathedral-like chamber. His light could not find the ceiling. It was too high. But the walls were covered in them. Symbols, carvings. Not the simple pictographs of ancient hunters. They were impossible, geometric shapes that seemed to twist and fold in on themselves. Glyphs that hurt the eyes to look at, yet seemed to hold an immense, serene logic. They were symbols of rebirth, of cycles, of time folding back onto itself. In the center of the vast, silent chamber was a pool, a perfectly circular pool of black water. He approached it. The water was unnaturally still. Not a ripple, not a tremor. He held his lantern over it. The light did not reflect. The surface of the pool remained a perfect, light-absorbing darkness. He looked closer, and he saw a face, staring back at him from the black water. It was his face, but it was not. The eyes were ancient, serene, empty of all fear, all ambition, all life. It was the face of the men who returned from the cave, the face of the reborn. He stared, mesmerized. He felt a profound peace settle over him. The silence was no longer terrifying. It was beautiful. His maps, his charts, Lyra, the sun itself, they all felt like a distant, noisy dream from a life he had lived long ago. He felt an overwhelming urge to sit, to stay, to let the silence take him, to let his old, loud self die and become this new, still thing. He had been here for how long? Minutes? Days? He checked his pocket watch. The hands were still. The mechanism had frozen. Then, a sound. A single drip. From the unseen ceiling, a drop of water struck the black pool. Plink. The sound was an explosion. It was a violation. It was as loud as a mountain collapsing. The black water rippled, and the ancient face shattered into 1,000 pieces. The spell was broken. Panic, hot and violent, seized him. The silence was no longer peace. It was a tomb. He scrambled back. He ran. His footsteps now thundered in the passage, the echoes returning with a chaotic, terrifying force. The cave was alive again, and it was screaming at him. He ran, falling, cutting his hands on the sharp rock, crawling toward the pinprick of daylight that seemed 1,000 miles away. He burst out of the fissure, collapsing onto the rocky ground, gasping, bathed in the sharp, clean wind. The sun was bright. The birds were singing. It was the most beautiful, violent noise he had ever heard. He looked up. Lyra was there. She was sitting on a rock, sketching a flower, bathed in the light of the late afternoon. She looked up, not with panic, but with simple curiosity. "Elias? You're back already? Did you forget something?" He was trembling, his hands bleeding. How long?" he gasped. "How long was I gone?" Lyra frowned, looking at the sun. "What do you mean? You just walked in. You were gone for maybe 30 seconds, a minute at most." Elias stared at his hands, at the dried blood that looked hours old. He stared at his watch, its hands still frozen. He stared at the mouth of stillness, which breathed its cold, silent air. He had fallen through a portal. He had touched a place where time sleeps, and he had returned. He never mapped the cave. He never spoke of what he saw. He returned to the village, but he was not the same. The reborn villagers would nod at him, a silent, knowing greeting. Elias, the man of logic, now found the world too loud. The laughter of children, the hustle of the market, the very rhythm of his own heart. It all felt abrasive, a chaotic noise interrupting a perfect, beautiful silence. He spent his evenings staring at the mountains, his eyes as calm and as still as the deep black pool that waited and dreamed in the darkness. We search for quiet in a loud world. We meditate, we seek nature, we close our eyes. But the legends warn us to be careful what we wish for. True silence, absolute silence, is not an absence. It is a place. It is a subterranean portal. It is a womb of eternity that waits to rebirth us. And if you find it, if you step inside and let that stillness wash over you, you may find that the you who returns is not the you that went in.